G'day everyone and welcome to Tuesday Night Live, the show where we ask all the big questions but don't take ourselves too seriously. My name is Andrew Sennett. Let me introduce Bathurst's answer to Leonard Hofstadter, my co-host and conversation partner Ryan. Hey Ryan, how you going?
Good, thanks. Leonard, really? That's what you think?
Yeah. No, I don't think you appreciate how many parallels there are between you and Leonard Hofstadter.
I don't think there are that many parallels.
It's not just the glasses, mate.
Right. This is Leonard from Big Bang Theory, right?
Yeah. I feel like it's a relevant pop culture reference that people will know about.
But he's a physicist and I'm a mathematician.
But they're both
maths. That's worlds apart.
It's like applied maths.
Yeah. It's maths for people who want something to look at, I guess.
But when you get into relationships, you guys are pretty much the same person. You know, you got a wife who came from the country to make her way in the world in the big smoke, and who ended up having to settle for a nerd. So there's that.
Is that what Penny like that? Is she? She's in the country.
She ended up settling for Leonard.
That was
her payoff. She came for a career in the movies, and she married a nerd. So yeah.
And M settled for me in the same way.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Anything else? Any other?
There's probably a few. Maybe the audience could perhaps extend the metaphor out a little bit and tell us other ways that Ryan is just like Leonard Hofstadter. Anything been occupying your mind this week, mate?
Not anymore.
No? I tell you, something happened to me. I happened just by accident to watch free-to-air TV last night. And I don't know the last time I watched free-to-air TV. It must have been a year or two since I've actually properly watched a show. And it was Hacksaw Ridge was on. And so we watched that movie. But what really interested me wasn't the movie, it was the ads. I don't know if you've noticed the free-to-air ads at all, but it feels like to me, after being away from free-to-air TV for a while, that the free-to-air ads have got really bad.
In what sense?
Oh, they were just really lame. Like there's one for Woolies where a woman's keep cup talks to her.
Okay, well, in my experience, country ads are always a bit weird.
No, but the era of country ads is gone. We're watching, mainstream TV now. So this was an ad for Woolies. It wasn't an ad for. It was a national ad.
Yeah, okay, I guess
it wasn't like Woolies' hit country ad.
So the Woolies, the keep cup, talk to the person.
Yeah,
right. And
another guy, I think his glasses thing up in the up in the top of his talk to him about Woolies. And there's no anyway. The ads were just universally really bad and lame. Yeah. And I thought maybe they must be spending less money on free-to-air ads now because people are watching Netflix.
Probably true.
But and YouTube.
Well, Kelly likes the Aldi ones. Have you seen them?
No, I haven't. I can't wait. I'm going to now. I'm hanging on. I'm going to go back up tonight and watch another 2 hours of free-to-air TV. Just
yeah, having the Keep Cup talk to you has the same vibe as that. This one was a national one too.
Yeah.
But the car safety one where you had to put the seatbelt on, and the seatbelt would tap you on the shoulder.
Yeah.
Whistle at you. That's the exact same vibe.
Yeah, that level of lame.
Yeah.
But that was a government ad, so you expect lame for government ads. You expect big companies with millions of dollars to, I don't know, do better.
They probably it's all about making sure their name goes out now.
Yeah, it was incredibly lame. All the good ideas have been taken, so people have to be more creative.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Right.
Maybe.
All right.
Okay. Well, we should move right along. Welcome to the show again, everyone. If you're watching on YouTube, do all the YouTubey stuff. In particular, make a comment and whack the notification bell because that helps with the YouTube algorithm. If you're joining us from the Facebook side of things, welcome back. And a reminder again about this show. This show is all about a conversation. So we're going to share real-life encounters of people with Jesus, and we're going to share some of those big questions about God, life, the universe, and everything. But what's going to make this work is your participation, is you getting involved and engaged. So if you do have something to say, if you whack the hashtag mailbag on it, we will be able to take more easy notice of it, and we'll try and include it in our conversation as well. You can ask questions about anything you'd like. I want to say about the mailbag, it's not just for questions about what we're talking about tonight on the show, although it is for that, but if you've got any other questions about those big questions of life, feel free to ask them. We don't guarantee great answers, but we'll have a bang. Anyway, it's time to get on with the show. So, Ryan, when you were a kid, which was like last week,
Which was what, a century ago for you? Or?
yeah, it was last century for me for sure. When you heard the word Christ, what did you think when you were a kid?
Yeah, I definitely thought at one stage that it might have been his last name.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely what I thought of it growing up.
Particularly the way people use it as a curse. It just just kind of made it feel like it was, I was Andrew Sennett and he was Jesus Christ. And yeah.
And then people would, I remember being confused when people would say Christ Jesus.
Oh, yeah. It was like what?
Like, you can't do
Who's
that.
this Barcham Ryan?
Yeah. It's like Bond, James Bond.
Yeah, although people do call me Sennett, but...
But so that was confusing.
Yeah.
I don't think it was until I was probably in my teens where someone told me that wasn't
explained it to you.
It wasn't his last name.
It's one of those moments, isn't it? Those things as a kid that you just make assumptions about, that when you realise that it's not like that. It's not what you thought.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and so the name Christ means king, and in the big picture of the Christian Bible, it means king of the world, God's great king, the king that's come to fix stuff and make things right.
Yes, and it's a king that has been thousands of years in the making.
Yes, yeah, they've been waiting for it for a while. So that this title first comes up, I think, 1,000 years before Jesus appears. So it's a long time coming.
But it's not but for them, like Christ is the Greek version of it, but the original one is the Messiah. That's the Hebrew.
And so if you've ever heard the word Messiah, it's exactly the same word.
So how come people don't say Jesus Messiah?
I imagine some of the early people would have. They would have used Messiah much more readily than Christ, particularly Jewish people. But people in the broader world would have just used the Greek word because that's the language most people spoke.
Is it equivalent to saying King Jesus? Is that like, can you jump back and forth between them, or do you think that there's...
It is pretty much equivalent to saying, like Queen Elizabeth, King Jesus. Yeah.
Cool.
And so this moment is basically, this is a big claim because the Jewish people have been looking for this moment for, somewhere between 600 to 1,000 years. They've been waiting for a certain person to emerge, to emerge into history. And for them, this is the fulcrum. This is the moment around which all of history pivots or turns, is this moment when their king arrives. And so they've been waiting for a while. I wonder what it would be like. Have you ever had to wait for something?
Yes, at some points. Never 1,000 years, but
No.
Or 600 years, let alone.
I feel like the longest I've waited for something is about 9 months. I waited 9 months to get married.
I'm
I'm trying to think of anything I waited for longer. In our world, it feels like everything's fairly immediate. If we have to wait longer than 2 minutes for our fast food, we're outraged.
We're slamming on the
Yeah.
desk. 9 months for, my kid to come, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't think I've had to wait that long for things.
No.
Like, or maybe, I had to wait a year when I didn't get the present that I wanted at Christmas.
You had to wait for next
I had to
Christmas.
wait till the next year.
Did waiting a year
But then I
work?
had birthdays, so, which was just around the corner, because my birthday's in February. So.
Yeah, I feel like quite often we don't really get a sense of what it would mean to wait for something that long, and to have that expectation to pass it down to your kids. You're not going to see it in your lifetime. You pass it down to the next generation, and they wait. And there were people in Jesus' time who had been expecting this to happen and waiting for it. And imagine being that generation. Imagine being alive at that time and seeing Jesus and going, "Oh, I think this might be the guy." That'd be pretty incredible, wouldn't it?
Yeah. This is to say that this is the guy that your grandparents died waiting for.
Yeah.
That'd be,
Yeah.
And particularly that Jesus is like, or what the Messiah or the Christ is, that figure that's like, with all the world's problems.
Yeah.
This is the person. This is the figure that's going to come and fix these things, or the injustice, or the sadness, and all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
The lack of peace.
Yeah, absolutely, all that sort of stuff. And I think For people who are not religious at all, I think one of the puzzling things for non-religious people is, I guess we can get the fact that, you know, Jewish people had been looking forward to this person, and so they would be pretty pumped that he's arrived. But why has Jesus exerted such influence on the culture of the entire world, and particularly on Western culture, for 2,000 years after he arrived? Like, why has he influenced even us? We've already seen some of those influences in the last few weeks, and we're going to see more as we go on. Why has Jesus exerted such an influence even on us? That's a puzzling question, I think, for many people. And I think the answer is probably tied up with what people are waiting for, what we long for. Because there are things we don't have, aren't there? Even in our fast food kind of everything happening in the moment, you know, I can basically put an order in online and I can have almost anything I want within a few days. Then there are things, though, that we are looking for that we don't have. Things like justice, peace, truth, life, wholeness, those kind of things. The things we long for and never quite achieve and never quite have. And we're still waiting to see if we can get. So I guess there's that sense of waiting.
Yeah, that's a very big picture. But the things that we really yearn for.
Yeah.
I think it's time to head into story time with Amelia.
Oh, excellent. Off we go.
Hey, I'm Amelia. I'm going to share a famous passage from Luke's biography of Jesus, where Jesus makes a powerful comment on what it means for his disciples to follow him. Luke writes this: Once, when Jesus was praying in private and his disciples were with him, he asked them, "Who do the crowds say that I am?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others that one of the prophets of long ago has come back to life." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" Peter answered, "God's Messiah." Jesus strictly warned them not to tell this to anyone. And he said, "The Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and he must be killed, and on the third day be raised to life." Then he said to them all, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit their very self? Whoever is ashamed of me and my words, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his glory and in the glory of the Father and of the holy angels. Truly I tell you, some who are standing here will not taste death before they see the kingdom of God."
Thanks, Amelia. Wicked. Sick. I once asked a bunch of people, if they were in charge of everything, what would they do first? What's the biggest thing in the world that needs fixing? And what would you do to fix it? And as you can imagine, people had all sorts of ideas and all sorts of solutions. It's amazing just how peaceful and just the world would be if only I got my way in everything. The fact is that humans have been trying to fix the problems that humans have created, well, pretty much since the beginning of calling ourselves humans. And we've never been all that crash hot at it. In fact, that would be an interesting exercise for us, I think. Instead of banging on about left versus right or social justice versus capitalism, it might be useful just to step back from all that and consider the fact that in general, we suck at solving the biggest problems we cause. It might be the case that we can't be the solution because we're the problem. You know, you can't separate the world into goodies and baddies in such a simplistic way that we try to do. When we do that, when we try to separate the world into goodies and baddies, all we end up doing is making the goodies into a new bunch of baddies because they're never perfect, and giving them power just highlights that. The goodies try to deal with the baddies, and the way we do that is to exercise our power against them. And this in the end makes us no different. We become the next generation's baddies to be knocked down. So what's the answer to that vicious cycle? Well, maybe there isn't one. That's what a lot of people believe, and I get that. The history of humanity doesn't give us much reason for hope. We can't solve the problem. All we can do is make sure we're close to the top of the heap so that we don't suffer too much. Let's just define ourselves as the goodies and hope for the best. I can sympathise with that even if I don't like it. At least it's realistic. Sad, but realistic. So how do we solve the problem? The problem that every answer we come up with just seems to be another power grab by people who end up no better than the ones they beat down and replace. Well, in this encounter with Jesus, with his followers, we see God's answer. And it's so radical and outrageous that his own followers think he's nuts. In just 6 words, Jesus shows how radical and unthinkable God's plan is. In 6 words, Jesus upends the world we know. And those 6 words are, the Son of Man must suffer. The Son of Man must suffer. What does it mean for Jesus that he's the Christ, the great King of the whole world? It means that glory comes with suffering. That the crown he will wear is not a crown of thorns, is a crown of thorns, not a crown of gold. God's solution to the problems of the world, the problems that we cause, is not to seize power and break us, it's to suffer himself. His solution to injustice is to suffer injustice himself. His solution to human pain is to take that pain on himself. His solution to our weakness is to become weak. His solution to our self-glorying is to empty himself of glory and to die for us. His solution is losing power, not gaining it, giving it up, not seizing it. Now, we don't associate glory with suffering, but God does. Because the true greatness of a person is not shown in their exercise of power for its own sake, but in its exercise for the sake of others. And the beauty of God's way is that it deals with everyone where they are. It gives everyone a chance of the good. It doesn't privilege one group over another as if we can perfectly separate victims and oppressors in this world. Jesus doesn't buy into that way of dealing with people. Instead of elevating one group over the other, he chooses a different path. The path to peace, justice and truth is the path of the cross, not the path of conquest. The great King comes, and the way he brings justice is to suffer injustice. Now, we think the path to justice is about taking power and using it against those we perceive as unjust, but for God, dealing with injustice meant taking on that injustice in himself, suffering the greatest injustice on behalf of others. Jesus will lead the world as its king by dying for it, dying for you and dying for me. And this way of thinking is one that has upended the history of the world. Time and time again we've seen the truth that the best people are those who give their lives for others, not those who seize power for themselves. Servant leadership is the heart of true humanity and the only solution to the world's problems. Why? Well, because that's how God rolls. So, Ryan, how would you solve the world's problems? What would you do first?
Well, I liked Kelly's suggestion to just get rid of all the coffee because it smells so bad.
Get rid of all coffee?
Yeah. What do you think
wow. Okay.
Yeah, actually, now that I ponder that, I feel like it would create more violence.
All right. So you're not a coffee kind of guy?
I can not really.
You don't indulge in the one of the few legal drugs out there?
No. I can have an iced coffee. That's okay to a degree, but no.
A sugary, milky drink.
That's right. Yeah. It's too bitter otherwise. Ugh.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
So I wouldn't mind that, though. I think other people feel strongly enough or differently about that, at least, that there may be more wars than less.
Right.
But it reminds me of there's a Rick and Morty episode where this kind of idea happens, or what does happen, not that coffee gets taken or gotten rid of, but people will get like mind controlled because there's like a hive mind.
You want to exercise mind control?
Yeah,
you want to be mega mind?
Yeah, I reckon. Yeah. I reckon that'd work. Surely, if everyone's under my control,
he's the good baddie, isn't he, or the bad goodie? Or
yeah. In Megamind, yeah. But in Rick and Morty, it's just a thing. It's like a parasite, hive mind kind of thing.
It's like the Borg.
Yeah, like the Borg. That's right.
Yeah.
It's an older reference, but yes.
Well, maybe Rick and Marty are actually redoing the whole Borg thing in their own way.
It's very possible. They riff off a lot of old pop culture references.
Yep.
But yeah, mind control. That would be my solution.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't know what else I'd do. Like, maybe I could ensure that everyone has what they need, but then people will want more.
Yeah.
I guess.
There's a show, I'm trying to remember the name of it on, is it on Amazon, about superheroes? And they're all evil. They're terrible.
Yeah. Oh, I think I've heard of it.
They're the worst kind of people. The Boys, I think it's called The Boys.
Yeah.
And they're just awful. They're terrible people. And it's all about corporate, that sort of thing. But it's the marketing of being a hero, of achieving justice. But they're just terrible, terrible people.
I've
yeah.
heard some good stuff about that show. But...
It's very dark.
Yeah, okay.
It's very, very dark, which I guess suits some people. I feel like I've got to be in a mood to watch that show.
Sure.
Yeah, but there is a reality there about the way we deal with the world, isn't there? For us, we really do want to split the world into goodies and baddies, and it's very hard for us to see that we're all just this blur mix. We're not light and dark. We're kind of grey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny that when you were talking about that, it reminded me of George Orwell's book Animal Farm, about how so there's it's an allegory. Is that the right word?
Yep.
I'm a maths person, so there's the repressed or oppressed animals, and then there's the farmers. They do a revolution, but what ends up happening is that some of the animals end up becoming just like them. Spoilers.
The pigs, yes.
Yeah, the pigs. Two legs good. Sorry, four legs good. Two legs better.
Bad. Yeah.
Better.
Yep.
But and so Orwell was talking about or making a critique on the communist or socialist movement. But I think he can go bigger.
It is perhaps, I think, the fatal flaw of the social justice movement is that in the end they turn themselves into despots, into violent and evil people. And it's a real question. I think it's one of the key questions is, can you be for justice and not become unjust yourself? It's a fascinating kind of question, because I think we sympathise with people who are interested in social justice, because they're not wrong about problems in the world, are they?
No.
There are real problems, and those real problems are caused by real people.
Yeah, but what's the saying? Is it absolute power
corrupts absolutely?
Absolutely, yeah.
Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Yeah, and that is the problem. If we seize power, we end up perpetrating the same things. We end up becoming the evil that we tried to get rid of, and that's partly because the problem is us.
Yes, but we can't become convinced that the problem's not us; it's them.
Yes, yeah, of course, that's right. And so we've always got to be defining the them who are not us.
Yeah. We'll happily ignore our own problems.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
There's a good question from Isabella. I didn't get that up. So we're talking about Jesus being the Messiah. But I thought it was a good one to ask. Why were people more willing to think that Jesus was a prophet rather than a Christ or a Messiah, do you think?
Because that's a good question, Isabella. I think the reason for that is that pretty much anybody could claim to be a prophet. Being a prophet was, all you were doing was claiming that you were speaking some, I guess, true words with respect to God, and anybody could claim that, and that was okay. And so it wasn't such a biggie. Not all prophets were taken equally seriously. What did Jesus say? No prophet has honour in his own country.
Yeah.
And so Jesus certainly was claiming to be a prophet in that sense, to speak God's truth. But he was obviously, claiming to be more than that. And the claim to be Messiah is the controversial one, because it's a claim to rule, not just I've got something good to say, or I've got something important to say. A prophet in the end can be ignored, and usually was ignored. And if they weren't ignored, they were kind of ridiculed or persecuted. But what do you do with someone who claims to be your king? Imagine that someone random showed up here and just basically put himself over as your king and said, "Okay, now you've got to go my way.
You've got to do what I say."
I feel like we would have some questions.
at best.
Yeah.
I think most people would just outright ignore that person.
Yeah. And so that's why most people were willing to accept the fact that in some sense Jesus might have been a prophet, but they definitely weren't happy just to go along with any claim for him to be the Christ, the King.
Yeah. And so Jesus is the king. Well, that's what he's claiming, at least. And your big one of your big points in what you were saying just a second ago was that he came to suffer.
Yes,
and
the
that's
radical way. That's the
yeah.
radical way that God's king deals with injustice.
Yeah. And so what does that look like? So he's come to suffer. Why suffer? Why not just deal with things? What is it about the cross what effect does that have, I guess?
Yeah, it's a great question, because it reminds me of that scene in the movie Monty Python and the Life of Brian, where at the end of the movie, have you seen the movie?
Yeah.
The
look on the bright side of life bit. Or
well, yes, before that, with the Judean People's Front Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
All these people are up on crosses, and the Suicide Squad comes, and you think they're going to release everyone from their crosses, but instead they get out their swords and kill themselves. And as one of them's dying, he goes, "That'll show them." And you're thinking, well, what does death show anyone? And what does an unjust death show anyone? And I think that's a really good question, because if God's plan was simply to die, that doesn't seem to make much sense. And I think that's why his followers had such a problem with it, why they reacted so badly to it and wanted to tell him off. There's no way you're going to die.
Because they more than once were just like, that's not right, that's not true.
Yeah. And so, when the other disciples remember this episode, they talk about how, they tore shreds off Jesus, and he tore shreds off them right back. They did not get this, and they thought he was crazy. It didn't make sense to them, and I think for most of us, we're the same. How can dying make any difference to the problem? You've just removed yourself from the field. But for God and for Jesus, it's the way he dies and who he is who dies that makes the difference. And so he dies not just as another person who dies, yet another innocent victim, which he was, but he dies as God come to save and to rescue. He dies to deal with our injustice, to take our injustice away. And so there's a mechanism, there's something going on when he dies. That's the claim that he's making. And so he's not simply claiming, well, here I go to die, yay for me.
Yeah.
He's saying, no, here I go to die in order to become the king that the world needs, a king who'll actually save people. And that's one of the interesting things about this word Christ, this title. From the very beginning, from 1,000 years before, this title had been associated with a very particular kind of king. It wasn't just somebody who ruled for his own sake, it was somebody who rescued. And so this king, this anointed king, that's what the word Christ means, it means anointed one. This king was a rescuer from the very beginning. And that's how Jesus comes. Jesus comes to die not simply to die, he comes to die in order to rescue people.
Yeah, he's not simply a martyr.
Yeah, and so him taking on our injustice, him taking on our pain, him taking on our guilt, is his way of actually dealing with the evil and injustice of the world and enabling us to be rescued from that vicious cycle that we're in, the vicious cycle that we cannot get ourselves out on, no matter how hard we try. And the history of the world is testimony to that, that no matter what people have done to try and solve the world's problems, it has not worked. Some things have been slightly better than other things. You can look at things and go, there's some things that have definitely not been the answer. But on the whole, every answer hasn't really fixed the problem. And even the best systems of government in the world today, the people within them can tell you very clearly the injustices of them and the bad things about them. So, yeah. And so he's come to really, to deal with that vicious cycle and to end it. And he does that by dying.
Yeah.
So, but I think there's that. I think we see this. I think the funny thing is, I think as an argument, not a lot of people will go, oh, I don't know if I like that. I don't know if that makes sense to me. But I think the cultural significance of the cross does make sense. Like, so over and over and over in movies, what do we see? Particularly in the last 30 or 40 years in the movie industry, one of the things that people have taken pains to point out is that retribution, retaliation and violence will not bring justice. Vengeance doesn't work. And you just have to look at the movies, the books, the TV shows that have been done to see that. In very, very clearly.
Yeah, well, that reminds me of, I don't know if I want to say it. It's been out for a while, but The Mentalist.
Yeah, it's not cool. So, thanks, Leonard.
Yeah. His whole arc is about getting revenge for the people who killed his wife and child.
And that show goes for like 7 seasons or something, doesn't it?
Yeah, or 7 or 8, yeah.
And it takes 5 seasons until he actually gets his revenge.
Yeah, I think there's 1 season after they finally. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The show jumped the shark. You needed to keep that tension of him seeking vengeance, because once he got it, the show wasn't worth it anymore.
And it was pretty dissatisfying as well.
Yeah. But that's the thing. The show. It's ironic, isn't it? Even the ratings on the show showed you that violence and revenge don't work.
Yeah.
We don't bring justice our way. It doesn't work. And the thing that's shown us that, the thing that's highlighted that, is the cross itself. God's pattern of subverting that right from 2,000 years ago shows us that.
Yeah, there was a question earlier from Lockie. If we can get that up, that I'll just ask was this how you would answer his question here? So what he's asked is, when you say Jesus has exerted such an influence on us, so you said that before, do you mean like the world or Christians, or which one specifically? It was at the beginning somewhere. What would you say to that, Seno?
You want to ask it again? I can't see it. There it is. When you say Jesus exerts such an influence on us, do you mean the world or on Christians? I mean both. I mean on the world and on Christians.
And you're saying that like things like this is an example of that.
Yeah, I think we see the truthfulness of what he says. But certainly he's influenced our culture in ways that we don't always fully comprehend. But even here, I think there's because we know that vengeance doesn't work. And in TV shows, people are doing this thing. How do you deal with a bully? Well, you can't just take it out on them. That won't solve the problem. You need to actually. Quite often, the solution to injustice and the path of peace is an act of taking on the injustice and dealing with it ourselves. So often, when you talk to kids who've been bullied, they actually need to suck it up. They need to take those things on themselves. They need to learn forgiveness. They need to learn the maturity of not taking vengeance. And that's actually a very Christian trait. That's the influence of Jesus and God's solution to injustice here, which is taking it on himself. And I think that this is what we see very clearly in the world, that we can't just solve the problems of the world by taking out a hammer and smacking things down. Yeah.
Yeah. But even we can't even do it ourselves by becoming martyrs. That doesn't solve problems either. So there's something about Jesus' death, particularly, that's.
Well, Jesus' death is peculiar in that.
Is
we know our sufferings don't carry the same weight, but we know the pattern is the same. I think it's a way we can act. But this is why Jesus, I think, deserves his place as a leader of humanity. Because he shows us what true humanity can look like, as he takes on injustice and death for us and solves the problem, so that we don't have to deal with it ourselves. I think that profoundly shows us why Jesus is a great leader and a true leader of humanity. Yeah. And as much as we want to reject religion, when we look at Jesus and what he does, when we look at the patterns that he lived, when we look at his answer to injustice, I think we find that attractive. We find that to be good and right. Yeah. It does make sense.
Yeah, it makes him worth following, for one.
Yeah.
But in terms of what we talked about in the last few weeks, worth putting your trust in.
Yeah.
Or putting your faith in.
Yeah. And I think this is the thing that we come to when you look in this episode with Jesus and his disciples, his friends, his followers. How he finishes, and he talks about, if anyone will come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. That's what it means for us that Jesus is the King, the Christ. That he's the answer to our search means that we need to give up everything else that we're holding on to and grab hold of him. You need to give up everything to follow him. Yeah.
That's hard. That's a big call. Not many people can do that.
Yes. Yeah.
To give up, to put all your eggs in one basket in some sense.
That's right. Yes, not to hedge your bets,
Yeah.
and to give up on some of our cherished kind of little things that we hold on to. It reminds me of that Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which I found out it's like 30 years old now. That movie. It's, like 1989 it came out.
Yeah, it would be late 80s.
Yeah, 89.
There you go.
So that's like 32 years ago. I was an adult when that movie. Anyway, let's not start. Let's not go there. I'm very old. Anyway, but that movie is one of the great movies, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And if you remember that movie, in the last scene of that movie, as they've got the cup, the Grail, and they kind of take it over the seal, and the whole place starts to fall apart, and the cup falls down this crack, and there's this woman who's reaching for it, and Indiana's got her hand, and she's reaching for it, and he says, "I can't hold you, she's slipping." And he says, "You need to give me your other hand, let it go, and give me your other hand, let it go, and give me your other hand." And because she's not willing to give up, she's lost. She dies, and then as she's lost, he finds himself stretched out. And his father's got his hand, and he's reaching for the cup, and he can just touch it. And he's reaching for the cup, and he can just touch the outside of the cup. And he's going, I can get it. And his dad goes, "Indy, let it go." It's just one of these magic moments in Sean Connery's kind of accent. Indy, let it go. And in the end, he does. He gives up that thing. He gives up that incredible thing. I mean, this has been a thing people have been searching for thousands of years, blah, and he's found it.
The whole movie's been about finding it.
The whole movie's been about this search, and he gives it up and saves his life. And that's the picture that Jesus is presenting here, is exactly that picture. Those things in life that you're reaching for are not worth it.
Yeah. It reminds me, have you ever heard of the old ways of catching a monkey?
No, remind me.
So there's old stories and old ways in which how do you trap a monkey that keeps stealing your food or keeps being a pest.
Yep.
And there's lots of different nuances of the same story, but the whole idea is that you have a jar with a banana or a cookie in it. So the whole idea is that you have a jar that's big enough for the monkey's hand to fit in, but not big enough for the monkey to grab the food that it wants and get out of the jar. So the banana or the cookie.
Yep, this is a very old story.
Yeah. So it can get in, but if it grabs it and holds onto it, it can't escape it.
Yeah.
And what they find is monkeys grab this food, this banana, this cookie, whatever it wants to be, and get stuck.
Yeah.
And it can't get out. And the weird thing about these things is that the monkey never lets go of the food.
Yeah. It's a very human trait, though.
Yeah.
That immense stupidity is very human.
Yeah. And so what people do, hunters or people who try to trap them, just come up, they just walk up to the monkey and they just pick him up.
Yeah.
There's no fight, there's no struggle, because the monkey's too busy wanting to hold on to this thing that it desires, even though it's going to kill them or get them trapped.
Yes, and I feel like that is such a human thing. We see it over and over again. People who can't let go that thing they're holding on to take hold of life.
Yeah.
But that's what this episode, in a sense, is all about. Jesus has come and he's offering himself. He's saying, "I've come to die for you. Will you turn away? Will you let go of those things that are trapping you, that are holding you back, and will you turn and take hold of me?" That's the kind of question he's asking. Yeah, good point.
We're gonna stop there. In a second we're gonna answer all your questions that we can get to.
Or some of your questions.
Some of them, as many that we can. But before we do, we're gonna go to our toilet break to give us all just a bit of space. And we thought we'd do a bit of mistranslations, something that made sense with the passage tonight. So we'll see you soon. All right, welcome back. Yes, the tiny grass.
Who's that with you there, talking of tiny?
Oh, Tiny. Yeah, we got Tiny Kylo. Yeah,
Kylo
we thought we'd give Ray a break and change it up a bit.
I feel like next week I'm going to run around and just put my head right there.
You can sit next to me and answer the questions. But we'll get started. The first question we've got is from Ben. And Ben is just trying to make sure that I'm okay after all those comments. I assume about Leonard. Is what you were saying about.
Were there some other parallels with Leonard? I didn't notice. I've got to scroll back through the comments.
No, some people were just saying rough.
Oh, right. They were just sympathising with you.
Yeah, that's right.
No, you don't need to be
they're on my
sympathised with.
side, Seno. Ha ha. The power is with
you
me.
weak little boy.
Take that. Yes, I'm doing well. Thank you, Ben.
Okay.
Next question. So can you hold up the photo of young Seno with the beard? Can you get that up for us?
Oh, yeah, look, I've taken it off. I'll hold it up here as close as I can get it to the camera. Can you see it there?
Hang on. There you go. Look at that. Oh,
okay.
It's a glorious beard.
That is my first beard. And look how lush and dark our hair was. Look how youthful and vigorous we looked.
Beautiful.
I used to work with a guy once when I turned 21. He said, when I was 21, I felt like I could tame tigers. He wasn't 21 anymore.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go to the next question, yes, Ben, it was very hard for me to concentrate when everyone was talking about bacon. That was going off in the comments.
Bacon?
Wasn't sure why. I missed how it started, but that's neither here
Okay.
nor there. We'll keep going. Next question.
Don't treat me like a potato.
Yeah, that's really so Welcome asks Seno, does Christ just mean king? Is it a...
Technically, the word means anointed, and so the Greek word Christos and the Hebrew word Mashiach both mean they're a description of someone who's had oil poured on their head, quite literally. And so, but having oil put on your head was how they marked out important roles. So there were other people who were anointed. Some priests were anointed with oil to mark them out for their role, but the word became particularly connected with kingship in the nation when first Saul and then David were anointed with oil to make them king. And so it then became a title for the king, the Messiah. And so it does, in the end, just mean king.
Great. Cool. Next question. This is from Ben. So do you think the Israelites knew that they had to wait 400 years to be freed from slavery?
Great question. No, I don't think they did. I think they didn't necessarily experience that slavery for all of those 400 years. It kind of came on gradually, if you like.
Well, they were in Egypt for 400
They might have been
years.
slaves for like 250 years or something. But for a while early on, they were honoured in the country and given a great place. And it was only really after Joseph died that they began to be treated badly and in the end became slaves. And that's what normally happens, isn't it? These sort of things, when you think about humans and political systems and injustices, they tend to come on slowly and then kind of ramp up later on. We just begin talking about people in a particular way, and then after a while that turns into the way we treat people in certain things, and then it gets bad.
Great. We'll go to the next question, which is from Lachlan. So why is servant leadership the answer?
Yeah, really good question.
Yeah.
Who'd pick it? We wouldn't pick it, would we? Because we think personal power is the answer. Why is servant leadership the answer? I think the if you like, the meta answer to that question is because that's what God is like. God is a servant leader. He's a leader who leads by love, by loving those that he's meant to lead. He doesn't exercise his power for his own sake. He exercises his power to love those he has power over. It's what makes God God, the Christian God God. It's what makes the Christian God different from all of the other gods that have ever been proclaimed in the world, in history.
Yeah, and it's hard for us to kind of wrap our head around that because to be a servant leader or servant natured is to put yourself at risk.
Yeah. I've been reading recently about how the ancient pagan world thought about their gods and how those thoughts about the gods influenced the way they lived and ruled and built their empires. And it was really horrific. The gods were capricious. They just did things on a whim. They were angry and then generous, but it was hard to pick, and you just kind of had to hope for the best. And humanity were in a really unenviable place. It was very difficult to actually serve those kinds of gods, and that shaped the character of those nations and how they thought about power, and how they thought about people, and how they thought about justice. And things that would horrify us were normal life for them, were normal morality for them. But the Christian God is very different.
Cool. All right, well, we'll keep going just for the sake of time. So another one from Lachlan. So what does it mean that Jews thought Jesus was a prophet? So we talked about it a little bit. But
yeah, it just means they thought he claimed to speak for God. It doesn't even mean that all of them thought he did speak for God. But a prophet was somebody who claimed to speak God's word. They didn't necessarily need to do that. They just needed to make that claim. Anybody could claim to be a prophet.
Yeah, and there were tests to see whether or not that was
there
true,
were, yes.
legitimate.
And people could follow the kind of prophets they liked. And people tended to do that. And so people would name themselves a prophet. And and what you would do is you would look for prophets who said things you liked. It's kind of like the way we search Google, you know. You put in a search term in Google and you choose the first thing that agrees with you.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's true. That's how
I knew
people
it.
would deal with. So nothing's changed. Nothing has changed in the world. It's exactly
new under the sun.
Prophecy in those days was exactly the way we use Google today. Use it to affirm yourself.
All right, we'll keep going. Next question. What practical ways could we deny ourselves? Does that look like not eating bacon and saving the tree?
No, it means, it's a really good question, because to deny yourself means to turn away from yourself as the answer. And so practically, I think what that means is not looking to yourself as the answer to your life and to your problems and to your issues, but looking to God. That fundamentally you will not be able to solve all the problems that you have, all the problems in the world, all the problems that you cause. You won't be able to solve the problem of you. You may be able to make some differences in your life by paying attention to it. You may be able to get a bit fitter, and you may be able to get a bit better at certain things. You may even be able to do better with people and be a nicer person. But you, in the end, won't solve the biggest problem. You won't be able to do that. And so to deny yourself is to turn away from yourself as the answer. To not think that you have it in your hands to be perfect, and that you have it in your hands to be the solution or the answer.
And to trust Jesus in that instead.
That's exactly right. It's to turn towards Jesus as the answer. Yeah. That's what he's saying. You know, you've got to deny yourself and take up your cross in that sense. You've actually got to follow along with me, follow the path I'm charting. And it's why Christians in the Christian church have been very different. That in their best instances, Christians have not been a militant religion. We haven't been people who've gone out and fought other people in order to spread our faith, although Christians at different times, or people have named the name of Jesus at different times, have done terrible things. On the whole, Christians have not been people who lived in the world like that. They have been people instead who've been willing to suffer injustice in order to serve other people.
Great. Well, I think we've got time for one more question. And so this is from Thomas.
Yep.
So this is a quote from what you've said. So people who have been bullied need to learn forgiveness. It's a fair point, but that seems to justify bullying, which isn't something that I can sit with.
Yep.
Is bullying part of God's plan?
Yeah, it's a really good question. No, and the point I was trying to make there is that when people talk about bullying today, when you see TV shows that deal with this with children, that's what people teach their kids, that they need to think differently. And quite honestly, it can be incredibly freeing not to be weighed down by that thing. Forgiveness has an incredible power in terms of letting things go and passing beyond things. When I talked earlier in the year about my brother and how he basically stole half of my mother's money as she was dying in a bed, forgiving him for that horrific thing that he did, that evil thing that he did, freed me. It made a profound difference to my life to be able to do that. It was actually good for me. And so I think there is some good in being able to forgive a bully, that doesn't justify the bullying. To forgive someone is to recognise that what they did was wrong, but it will be not to seek something from them for that. And so forgiveness doesn't ever justify an action. Forgiveness is a very real acknowledgement that the thing itself that's been done is wrong. But it's a determination not to seek vengeance for it. Okay, so there may well be the need for justice in some of these circumstances because somebody who's taken an action, bullying or whatever action it is, may need to pay a price in terms of the wider community. And quite often that's what happens with bullies, is they do get their comeuppance. But you don't necessarily need to have vengeance in order to make progress in your life, to get beyond it. And I think that's what the reality of forgiveness is. It's not saying that the actions don't matter. That's not what we're doing. And if we were doing that, that would be a great evil. Because Christians never ought to say evil doesn't matter. It does matter. But forgiveness is an acknowledgement of that, I think. So I'm happy to, if you want to come back with another question about that, and perhaps we'll have another bang at this when we do our kind of extra question times later on and deal with some of these other questions. But I understand I think I understand the point that you're trying to make, and I don't disagree with it.
Okay, I think that's all we've got time for today. But thank you for your questions, and as Seno said, we will have another episode dedicated to the ones that we've missed. So don't go anywhere, or keep in touch for those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are glad you've joined tonight. We're really pleased for all your comments and questions. We will try and get to the ones we haven't managed to get to tonight. Please remember to do those YouTubey things again. It does make a difference, and keep those questions and comments coming in. Have a great week. We'll see you next Tuesday night.